Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast, where we focus on how authors found success, looking at strategies that have taken them to the top of the bestseller charts, as well as what they've learned from their mistakes. Because being an indie author is more than knowing the latest marketing trend. It's about being innovative and creative and learning from your mistakes. Your co-hosts, Jami and Sara Rosette, couldn't be more different. In fact, they're a study in contrasts. However, despite all of their differences, they agree that sharing what they wish they'd known, both the good and the bad, is the key to moving forward. Let's get to the show.
Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. I'm Sara Rosette.
And I'm Jami Albright. And this week we have Mal Cooper on the show.
We do. And it's a really good interview.
Yes.
It's we talk about a lot of different things. Of course, we talk about ads.
Mm-hmm.
Mallory's kind of known for ads and being able to figure out what's wrong with your ads.
Especially Facebook ads,
Yeah. And then we also talk about co-working with authors and creating a literary universe. And I thought it was really good, and I think it'll be really helpful.
Yeah. Mallory's very, very smart. She's one of the smartest people I know. So she's got a lot of great information. So I think everybody will really get. There's a nugget in here for everybody, I think. Yeah.
And we also talked a little bit about craft. We talked about dialogue tags and how difficult they can be. And that one, we all agreed that you want to have dialogue tags instead of he said, she said, if you can.
Yes.
But then after a while, you kind of run out of things to describe.
Right. I always say I never know what to do with their hands. Their hands are just floating around. But you tagged me in a book by Valerie Howard, 1,000 character reactions for the from head to toe. So it's a small little book, but it's full of stuff. I haven't actually used it, but I have read through it, and it is kind of amazing. So we can put that in the show notes because I never know. I mean, it's like teeth. Here's one. Biting someone, really, tearing a package open with teeth in frustration, stuff like that, which is always
some of those
good.
will work in some genres, but not in others.
Exactly. That's right. I don't think you'd have anybody biting anyone in your cozies, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, maybe the dog, but I saw that on Twitter on the Creative Pen, her Jonah Penn's feed. And I thought, that sounds good. And since Jami and I always talk about how difficult that is, I tagged her. So
we even talked about writing something because it's so hard.
Right.
But now Valerie's done it for us. So
so it'll be just easier to buy the book. So.
Exactly.
So we'll put that link in there. So what have you been doing?
Oh, well, I have been busy because my release is Tuesday. So the day this comes out is the day of my release. And I've been busy, but I've handed off some of the responsibilities to Adriel Wiggins. She was on the podcast. She's our PA for the show, but she's actually, for the first time, I've given some of the responsibility away for ARC team and gathering some information and reaching out to authors and stuff. And that has been awesome. But it's kind of left me going, hey, what am I supposed to be doing? Because my file needed to be uploaded by Friday, and I uploaded it Thursday morning. So, so I'm ready to go. I'm just kind of waiting now, doing a little PR and promo online, and stuff. But
kind of feel like you're playing hooky.
I do feel like I'm playing a little bit of hooky. It's interesting, and I'm a little bit of a control freak. So, but things are going great. The early reviews are fantastic. So I can't complain. So, again, let me just say this to our listeners. And if you're a new listener, you won't have heard me say it, but our other listeners will. The only way you fail in this business is if you give up. And this book took me a year to write. I mean, my last release was last July, and it has been a horrible year filled with a bunch of really hard stuff without COVID, and then you add COVID in. And I mean, the only way you fail is if you give up. So don't give up. Don't give up.
Just keep going.
But I really wanted to mention too that I just listened to the Six Figure Author podcast with David Gaughran, which that's one of my favorite podcasts, but it's this week. What is this? Y'all, I can't remember dates. Just look for David Gaughran's name.
It's early July.
Yeah, early July. Cool. But it is so good. I mean, I'm going to listen to it again because it's got so much good information. I mean, I'm a David Gaughran disciple, so I think that what he says is just gold. And but there's some really good stuff in here that I hadn't really considered before. Some of it I was doing, some of it I'm not doing, and I need to be doing it. And yeah, it's really good information. So you'll just listen to that.
Well, we'll link to that. And that's funny because I had a little note to, like, if I see hear or find something that's helpful, I like to pass it on. And that was one of my little helpful things. And I was going to mention that he's updated Let's Get Digital, which is a great resource. So we'll link to all that in the show notes.
Well, and he talks about this in the podcast, so you can listen to it. But he has a new class starting, and it is for beginners. It is for people who haven't published or have published one book. Y'all, I will tell you, and I've said this before, that the success I've had has been because for a year I learned indie publishing. Like, I knew the things that should be done. Some of them I couldn't do because I didn't have the resources to do them. Some of them I knew I needed to do, and I figured out a way to get the resources. And that's what this class really is going to help you with. Like, what are the things that really need to be done? What are the things that I can wait on? And just sort of help and walk you through that process. Like, I'm speaking for him. I don't really know. I haven't seen the class, but listening to what he said, that's what it sounds like. It just sounds amazing. And so if you're new, and I think he mentions that it's going to be affordable, so that's great.
Yeah. And his stuff is always entertaining and really good. And so we don't get any affiliate or anything.
No.
We're just recommending it because we both
I'm just a David Gaughran
have learned a lot. So, learned a lot from him. So so well, good. Well, I think we're going to plan and do a special episode about launches later. So after the launch is over, we'll have a launch, or we'll have an episode where we talk about different ways to launch your book. So we'll do that.
Because there are different ways. Sarah and I launch a book completely differently. And depending on how often you release, you're going to launch a book. It's going to be a different kind of release. So
yeah, I was thinking about it the other day, and I think that I treat a sale the way you treat a launch.
Probably.
Because I don't have sales that often. So when I do, I want it to be a big, make a big splash.
Yeah. And that's another thing. I've got book 4 in my Bride series free right now, which I almost didn't do, but I was advised to do it, so I did. And gosh, it's done so well. I mean, and I'm seeing, like, that's book 4, but all the numbers of the other books are the ranks are improving. I'm not advertising those at all right now because I'm saving my money for the new
big
book
splash.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been really interesting that 4th book would get such. I mean, it's never been on sale before, but it's gotten a lot of attention, and I'm getting rid of a lot of them, so that's great. And my page reads are going up already, and it just went free on Thursday, I think.
Yeah, so that's good.
Yeah. So what about you? What's going on with you?
Well, I'm still working on the Christmas book, and that, in my mind when I started, I was like, oh, it'll just be a little 40,000 word Christmas story, not too complex. And so now at 45,000 words, I'm beginning to get to the end. I'm about to hit that place where I'm like, okay, this is the climax, and now it'll all go downhill from here, and then once I kind of get to that peak, then it's so much easier for me. The last third of the book goes really fast. So I'm happy, but I feel like it's taken me forever, but I'm getting there. And I've been doing a lot of stuff. I've decided to become an LLC, an S Corp. And so I've spent a lot of time switching everything over. And because I'm wide, I have, 15 different places to notify, which is great that they're all sending me money, but then I have to change all that. So that's taken a lot of time.
Right.
So maybe someday we'll do a podcast about business. We might have Joe back on and talk about transitions and how to do them.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
that would be really good. That would be really good. So I guess we should get onto the show if you have nothing else. Yeah,
sounds good. So
All
here's
right.
Malorie. So today we're really happy to have Malorie Cooper here with us today. Hi, Malorie.
Hey, how are you guys?
We're great. So, Malorie, tell us what genres you write and how did you get into writing?
So I write in sort of a broad swath of science fiction genres, mostly space opera, military science fiction, hard science fiction. I also sort of dabble in some YA, science fiction romance, and kind of just about anything else you could imagine. I got my started with writing when I was 10 years old, and I finished reading Lord of the Rings, and I didn't want the story to end, so I started writing really bad 10-year-old Lord of the Rings fan fiction. And I yes, it's probably still around somewhere too. It's awful. I'll cry if I read it. But I think I was about 30 years old, and I decided to try my hand at science fiction. I had always read a lot of science fiction. I started writing it, and it just sort of took off. And I was finally able to read books, and they came together really well, and the rest is kind of history.
Yeah. I would say so. Yeah, I would say it is.
That is great. Well, so what would you say was your first big success?
The first big success I had was this book called Outsystem. I first published it in 2012, and it kind of did nothing for almost 4 years. Maybe sold like 300 or 400 copies. And in 2016, my wife, Jill, started trying to do some Facebook ads for it. And we did a couple, she did a couple, I did a couple Facebook ads, and we did some ads that were a little bit different than what we've been seeing, ads that asked questions and were maybe a little bit controversial, and also ads that really played off some of the tropes that were out at the time, or that I had always seen on covers, and the way that science fiction books had always been marketed in magazines and whatnot. And that book, all my books together and Jill's books together were making maybe $400 a month. And when we got that book to start having traction with ads, we were making $25,000 a month 4 months later.
That is incredible.
That's wonderful.
I'd call that a success. Yeah. And one thing that I want to point out is that Malorie was talking about using the tropes in your ads, and I always like to point out good little nuggets when our guests give them to us. So if you guys are out there and you're looking at your Facebook ads and they're not working, are you using the tropes in your ads?
Absolutely, that's really key.
Mm-hmm. I think it is too. Trope sale. So that is. I always do that, and we were talking earlier, and I was saying when I heard Malorie having such success with Facebook ads, I'd been very afraid of them. And I thought to myself, I need to learn these. And I did, and it was really hard. And it took me about 8 months before I was really comfortable enough to dive in. But they've been game changers for me too. So, yeah, really great. So what do you wish you'd known about writing and craft, Malorie?
Well, so I'm one of those rare writers who maybe I'm not that rare. I have no idea. I never really got a lot of, I never really read any books on craft or how you're supposed to write or anything like that beyond like what a grade 12 education teaches you about like a 3-act play, a 5-act play and whatnot. But I read a lot of books. I remember when I was in grade 12, I would skip class and sit in the library at high school and read books all morning. Like I would skip all my morning classes and just read books. And I always kind of actually at the time I didn't really wonder too much. I was just more thankful. But now I wonder why the librarians didn't wonder why this kid was sitting there all day.
They're probably glad you're hanging out in the library.
Yeah, they're like, wait a minute, this kid's reading books quiet.
We got a customer. Yeah, exactly.
I think one a year I read 400 books, but I usually average between 200 and 300. And that was sort of how I learned how to tell stories. I learned a lot about, what kind of character arcs and what sort of tensions were good to have and how to sort of to build the climb towards the climax and just as a reader, the sorts of things I liked to read, like how much story did I like there to be after the climax, and did I get bored if there were too many ups and downs inside the story? And the answer to that is no. I loved it when there's lots of ups and downs inside the story. So I kind of just naturally wrote what I enjoyed. But the thing that I really didn't do well at for quite a while was understanding what to do with my characters' physical actions and their surroundings. I used to give a lot of description of setting and what the characters were doing with their hands and their facial expressions. To the point where, like, I always had them nodding, like I was describing like all the movements they were doing. This one reviewer was like, the story's really great, but the characters are like bobbleheads. They're like constantly knocking and waving their arms around and stuff. So one of the things I learned to do is to only ever use one physical action to describe what a character might be. Like, they might be raising their hands and shaking their head and yelling and stomping their feet, but don't describe all of that. Just pick one thing, the one particular action that they're doing that conveys what you want the most, and that's going to make the story the most concise and keep things flowing.
Yeah. Yes, that's so hard to do. The tags that you use, if you're trying to use action instead of dialogue tags, we've talked about this, Jami, on how frustrating that can be. And I've gotten to the point where I'll go through my manuscript when I get done and I'll search for the word nod, because I feel like I want to, like, you want to show that they're involved in the conversation or that they have a response. And so I subconsciously still use nod. He nodded, she nodded constantly. So I have to get that out. So I totally sympathize and understand that.
Yeah.
And the bubble characters too then. Eh?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I never know what to do with their hands. Like, it's just like, I never know what to do with my characters' hands. It's like so frustrating to me. Yeah. Sarah and I have spent a lot of time talking about this one thing because I just get so frustrated. And then I have to search for brows. My brows snake up, hook up, climb up someone's forehead a lot in my books.
Mine are always lowering. The brows lowered, the brows deeper, But with the hands I'm actually really good at, because the only times I ever really describe hands is if someone's crossing their arms.
Yeah.
Or they're like putting a hand on someone else's shoulder or shaking hands or clapping someone on the back or something.
Yeah.
So pretty good with hands.
That's good.
Yeah. Jami and I just have said we need to make like a compendium of movements and just like make a list of everything your characters can do instead of like nod or raise an eyebrow, because that's very common too. So.
I like saying every now and then I throw in someone cocked an eyebrow just to keep it.
Oh, that's a good one.
Keep it interesting.
I'm going to steal that one.
But my other one is mutter. My characters, some books that everybody's muttering the entire book. Editor's like, can you stop with the muttering? But it seems to rotate. Like last book, apparently everyone had like a wry grin, and they were.
Oh, that's hilarious.
She's like, dear God, like not again. She's like, you have like grimaces and wry grins like that.
This is why editors are so important,
right?
To help us see all these things. What assumptions did you make at the beginning of your writing career, and looking back, did they turn out to be right or wrong?
Oh, well, I mean, the first one, which was clearly wrong, was sort of the "if you build it, they will come" thing. That turns out not to be true at all, and I had to understand. And I think that's a really important thing for people to realize, is that there are like between 70,000 and 100,000 books coming out every month now, and there's just no way people are going to find you unless you market your book. So unless you want to hunker down and wait for and I don't even know if the trad pub industry is even going to survive the pandemic. But unless you want to try and wait for a trad pub deal, you're going to have to actually learn how to market books on your own, which is unfortunate, but just the way it is.
Yeah. We've talked about that on here before. And I always hate to say that because, when I started, I had no money, and, but I had $5 a day, and that's what I started with AMS ads. But I don't know if $5 a day would get you very far right now. But you can do things. You can save up before you put the book out, so you have some marketing money, or wait until you get the 3 or books out or whatever, and then start marketing. Those sorts of things still work. But yeah, I agree with you. It's just too hard to be seen.
Yeah. It's a difficult time for that. There are a lot of things you can do that are inexpensive ways to market, though. Jill and I still believe, so we recently released a book called Help My Launch Plan Sucks. We talk in there about how Jill took a brand new pen name, and using just like a I think it was like a 8,000 word reader magnet, built herself a list of 3,000 people in just a couple of months.
Yeah.
A mailing list, that is. And I feel that mailing lists and newsletter swaps are some of the best ways to market still, because they're great ways to target authors like you. So if you're like, I write books just like Sarah, then I can do newsletter swaps with her and grab her readers.
Right.
That's kind of how it works. And then you obviously it's a swap, so it's reciprocal, but they're free, so other than the cost of your mail software. That's one of the best ways. The downside to that is you're not reaching out to new readers who maybe have never heard of you. You're always trying to do a word of mouth thing, which has a lot of value, but it's limited.
Yeah. And slow. It's slow,
So.
I agree, though, that your email list, building an email list, that's one of the best ways to really kind of set yourself up. Yeah, that's really.
And that was another thing I resisted at the beginning. I didn't understand the value of that, and I didn't. Mm-hmm. I took way too long to build my mailing list.
Yeah.
That's very common, though. I think so many authors don't realize that that's important, and it's one of those things that almost everybody says, "Oh, I wish I had done that sooner." So very common.
Yeah. So have you ever made a mistake, Malorie, and that turned out to be a good thing?
A mistake that turned out to be a good thing.
Or you put something up and you went, "Oh crud, I shouldn't have done that." Or, you did a marketing thing that people told you wouldn't work or didn't work, but it turned out to be pretty good.
I guess one of the things that people recommended against quite a bit when I started out was putting characters on the covers of my books.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, almost all big space opera and military science fiction books had pictures of spaceships on the cover. And I had grown up reading a particular genre of science fiction where there were always characters on the cover. And so I went with that. And in addition to that, I write only female main characters. So I have like just a bunch of girls on the covers of my books. And I'm trying to do a bunch of, middle-aged white male Republican men with a bunch of girls on the cover of my books. And I never really thought about it at the time, but it actually turned out to work really well because it caused my books to stand out. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In this sea of starships, drifting above planets or shooting at each other, I've got a bunch of girls on the cover of my books.
Right.
Would you say that they still had similar elements so that people recognized that was the genre that they belonged to, even though they were a little bit different?
Yeah, I always did things like, instead of like an outside view of the starship, you'd see that the character was standing by a window and you could see space outside, maybe his mother's. So I did make sure to have a lot of those same elements in place. But I did make sure that my covers also always convey action, so people realize it's not just people standing there. Well, sometimes it's people standing there, but a lot of times they're shooting or explosions going off and stuff like that. So, and actually, I break the rules too, where I have guns pointing at the reader on my covers too.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, so I do all the things you're not supposed to do.
I didn't know. I actually didn't even know that if Amazon would let that through. So that's very interesting. I think it's important that what you said it earlier and then now, that you wrote the book, or you kind of fashioned your books after the kind of books you like to read. And just that whole issue of reading in your genre and knowing the genre expectations, knowing your audience. While you didn't do spaceships, you knew your audience. And so I just think that is so, so important. And I think that's where a lot of new authors miss the boat sometimes. They either don't read in the genre, or they're not particularly fans of the genre they're writing in, or they just don't know who they're writing to.
Yeah, when I started writing my first book in the series, I started writing about like 2006, 2007. At that point, I had read, I want to say it was at least 90% of all science fiction books written between 1960 and 2005. So I had a really good, except for maybe like some that really didn't appeal to me, but I had a really good understanding of what sort of stories were out there, what stories have been told before, which ones well. So I was able to dive in and write stories that I really enjoyed. And I think that's worked out really well for me.
I do too. So what about the opposite? Have you ever had something that you thought, this is a brilliant idea, this is going to be a winner, and that it just turned out to be a dud?
Oh, there's so many of those. I mean, some of them were just, I think from an ad perspective, something you were talking about how it took you 8 months to get comfortable with ads. Even myself, I'm kind of considered a bit of an ad expert. I would say that easily half the ads I make don't really go anywhere. They kind of flop. And I'll think like, oh, this is it's the perfect target. It's the perfect image. It's the perfect text. And I'll spend like an hour making it or more. And I put it out there and it's terrible. It has a high CPC and no one buys off of it. Yeah. And I'll slap up something else in frustration afterwards and it'll work perfectly. What the hell?
Well, that makes the rest of us feel better.
Yeah. And that's something I really try to reiterate as much as possible, that it's very hard for us to know exactly what's going to resonate with a random selection of 1 to 3 million people, right? You have to put a lot of things out there and then see what works best. Don't try and like create this one magnum opus ad that you think to be perfect. I mean, if people who are really good at marketing could create ads that could just instantly sell a product, that would work all over in any type of advertising, with books, TV, movies, whatever, but it doesn't, They have to try a lot of different ads for any type of product to see which one works.
Right. I find if I use the author targets on Facebook ads, most of those are traditionally published or they're hybrid. And my ads have to be just a little different for them as opposed to like targeting myself or my pixel, because those readers sometimes will be a little more indie focused. And so you have to kind of look at who your audience is and then adjust the ads that way. But it is frustrating when you think this is a winner and it just it's got a 80-cent CPC and nobody's clicking on it.
I did one really funny mistake where I was well, maybe not funny. I was testing prices because I'm actually a pretty firm believer in getting readers, not money. And so I actually price once the third book comes out in any one of my series, book 1 drops down to 99 cents. And multiple times I've tested this logic to see if I can make more money on the front end by having a $4.99 or $3.99 book 1. And every single time it's worked out that no, I make more money if book 1 is 99 cents. And that's not true for everybody. That's not true in all genres, and it's not true for everybody. But because I've done this experiment with other authors, and some authors, they make more money if book 1's $6.99, for example. But for me, 99 cents is the way to go. And I done the experiment, and I forgot to change a book back from $4.99 to 99 cents. And my sales sort of plummeted, but I was doing a bunch of other things, and I wasn't paying attention too much to my ads and sales. And by the end of the month, I looked at it and realized I'd lost over $5,000 by leaving that experiment running for an entire
that does make us all feel better. Yeah.
Can you give a little more information on how you test the pricing?
Yeah. So what I would do is I would have a suite of ads running pointing towards the book, both AMS and Facebook ads. And I would run, well, usually I already know what the existing pricing is doing. So in this case, the existing pricing was 99 cents. And I would work out my read through for a given amount of time. Usually I would take like the last 4 to 6 weeks, and then I up the price for a month at one point on the book, and I measured what my read through does. Both in sales are easier to calculate than KU, but I kind of get an idea of what my read through changes, because when you up the price on book 1, your read through improves. Because what usually happens is that you're now getting people who are squarely in your genre, whereas when book 1's at 99 cents, you get people buying it on a lark. Maybe they never even bother reading it. Usually give you a lower read through. So I was able to work out like what my read through numbers are between the different prices, and then from there on, it's just a matter of doing the math to find out how much more money you'll make based on the read through you have, and also the sales volume will decrease on book 1 when the price is higher. So it was really just running the experiment for a couple of weeks, figuring out my read through numbers, and then just doing the math to see what it all worked out at. And it turned out that I was even back then I was making about $5 more on the series by having a 99 cent book 1. And now, because I have 96 books in my Aeon 14 universe, if I hook a reader, I make about $250 from that reader.
And that's so important to know. If you can test it and figure out what really works for you, that's the way to go. Because it's so easy to say, well, I think that if I do this, it will work. But if you can test it and figure it out, then you have actual knowledge, you can use it to make good decisions. So since we're talking about nonfiction, tell us how you balance your fiction and your nonfiction writing, because you have several nonfiction books out as well.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of nonfiction, so it's relatively easy for me to do that. But back in 2017, I wrote my first Facebook ads book, which I updated last fall. So there's a second edition of that out now. And the second edition contains everything in the first edition, plus about an additional 90 pages of stuff. And those books actually write themselves pretty quickly because it's all stuff I know. Like when you're writing fiction, you have to constantly think like, what's the character going to do? How is their motivation make sense and all that? When I'm writing nonfiction, it's just like, these are the things that I do. I just write them. That one's pretty easy. The launch plan book, Jill and I actually had to spend a lot of time writing the launch plan book. I think that actually probably took us about 5 or 6 months. It started out with us just thinking like, okay, we all know all the things we're supposed to do when you launch a book, but we don't always do them all. And we thought, Jill and I talked about making some checklists for ourselves, and that sort of ballooned into writing a book about different types of launch plans. Because one of the things we found is that when people launch their books, they don't really think a lot about why I should pick a particular launch plan, which one works for me. They just say like, oh, person XYZ did really well for rapid release, or person XYZ only releases 4 books a year and does amazing. And so they sort of try to do that, but they don't understand what the situation is, what the audience is and all that. So we started that book that way. And then we discovered that you really can't look at the launch of an individual book even. You have to look at what your plan is for the year, what your plan is for the series, because consistency in your launches is really important. So that book did take quite a bit of time to put all that together, because we kind of wrote it and then we realized, oops, this really isn't about launching one book. This is more about launching a series or launching all the launches you're going to do in a year. So that one kind of ballooned. And then the marketing strategies one is not done yet, but it accidentally released. And I want to blame Amazon, but I'm pretty sure it was me that actually the page after I paid the. Sometimes you have 97 tabs open, and while you're waiting for Amazon to reload, you go somewhere else, and you forget to see that last darn page in KDP. I'm sure we've all done it, right?
Yep.
Like,
oh yeah, I'm guilty of that.
That change never went live. Whoops. So that's all. And actually, and the other thing I did too is I wrote a book called How Wearing Leggings Changed My Life, which is about my journey as a transgender woman. And that one actually kind of wrote itself too, because it was just writing about things that had happened. A lot of crying. So there was that. But so the nonfiction doesn't take a lot of time. It really does seem to write itself quite a bit more. It's the fiction that I mean, I guess for me it takes forever. For other people, they might think I write pretty fast, even when I'm taking forever on a fiction book.
Right. Tell us what it's like writing with your wife, though.
It's pretty fun, actually. I mean, we don't co-author a lot of the books together. I guess that depends, I guess, on someone's definition of a lot, because I think we've done 14 or 15 now together. But she and I work really well together. We've actually worked together almost our entire adult lives. So we're used to interact with each other and working together. We get along well enough that we can basically spend 24/7 with each other for months on end, and we both survive. So that's a good sign.
That's great. Because I feared. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to go on, but you say you feared for your husband's life?
I fear one of us would not emerge from the house if that happened over here. We did try to work together a long time ago. Our kids were little, and that could have been part of the problem. When you have little kids, there's just a lot of stress. But it did not go well, to the point both of us are like, whew, let's not do that again. Well,
Jill and I also, when we first started writing, we actually beta read each other's books and gave each other a lot of feedback. And I think we learned a lot then, too, about how to provide constructive feedback to other people in writing. Because, I mean, when you're an author, it's like it's your baby.
Yeah.
And especially when you're a new author, it's very hard to divorce yourself from that. By the time I feel like by the time I got to about 25, I was finally able to really divorce myself emotionally from the criticism of my book.
Yeah.
Like 90% of the time. Sometimes someone will still say something like, "Go away, it's my baby. I can't say bad things about it,"
Yeah, I just had that happen. In fact, 2 days ago. Yeah, so it's been very hard. Not because I mean, I know it's a product and stuff, and I want it to be the best it can be, but it's hard when somebody says, that's not working for me at all.
I was just going to say that the very first time I got a professional edit back on a book,
Uh-huh.
I pretty cried, and then I refused to look at it for a week.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny because I cried. I got an 11-paragraph email telling me why something wasn't working, and I was like, oh, and bless her heart, she didn't want to do it. I could tell. She just hated to tell me, but it was the right thing to do. Oh, but it still hurts. So tell me what you wish you known about marketing strategies, just in general.
I think the thing that I wish I'd really understood from the beginning, and I guess I started like back in 2012. I don't know that many people knew about this at all, but the also bought system on Amazon is probably one of the most important marketing tools that exists. And that is that, Amazon will show your books to people that if someone buys your book and then someone buys another author's book who writes similarly, Amazon will then look at their also boughts and show your book to that person's also boughts, or show your people who read by the other author. And that's not just on their product page. That's in emails. That's altering search results. A lot of authors don't realize this, but every single one of us gets different search results when we search for the same thing on Amazon, because Amazon knows what we like and knows what we're more likely to buy. And the other interesting thing is that Amazon cares a lot about what sells. So a product page that gets a lot of traffic but doesn't make sales will actually start to decrease in promotion by Amazon. Amazon wants pages that sell. So for example, if you were to make an ad, put it on Facebook, and that ad is click here for a free pony, and you have that ad going to your Amazon product page, you're going to see a lot of traffic, and it's going to be really cheap traffic off Facebook. You're probably going to pay like 3 or 4 cents per click because everybody wants a free pony. Or at least what this crazy ad's all about. They get to your book page on Amazon, they don't buy because it's not a free pony. It's a book about spaceships, and then they leave. Amazon will say, "Oh, this book doesn't sell. The product doesn't convert," and they'll stop showing it in search results, and they'll yank it from also bots and stuff like that. So that stuff all really matters, how well your book converts, and it's about the quality of the traffic you're sending there as much as anything else.
Yeah, and I found with because also bots they've moved them. They're at the very, very bottom of the page on my pages. And I've found that since they've done that, my read-through is not as high as it was. And I've always had awesome read-through. And but I've noticed a decrease in my read-through, which is not, it shouldn't be just because of the also bots, because I have all the stuff in the back. But I do wonder if it doesn't play a part. I have no idea if it does or not, but I know a lot of other authors saying the same thing. So yeah,
I still see the also bots in the place I always have, to be honest.
Oh, really? Ours are all, a lot of romance authors, theirs are at the very, like beneath their reviews at the very bottom. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's pretty much useless.
Yeah, pretty much useless. It really is. It's kind of hurt us all, I think.
Yeah. The one thing I do that's kind of surprised, a lot of other people don't do is, I mean, the reason why, like all those other product placements, like if you look at your book page on Amazon, it's full of product placements that aren't your book, right? It's full of the side, there's an ad running through your blurb, there's the also bots, there's the sponsored ads, there's probably 1 or 2 ads on the side of the reviews. Those ads are all there because they work. And the thing that they do, though, is they stop them from buying your book and they send them off to buy another product. Mm-hmm. So one of the big things I do is I advertise on my own pages most of all. Mm-hmm. So that when you go to one of my product pages for one of my books, it's just all MD Cooper. Mm-hmm. Everything is MD Cooper. There's like, if you're going to click on a link to go to a different book, it's going to be one of my books. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important to capture those readers and keep them with your stuff.
Yeah, and you do that with AMS ads?
Yeah, with AMS ads.
Yeah.
One thing I've noticed is that if I turn on auto-targeting ads on some of my books, they basically are targeting me. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's called like advertising in self-defense, where you're making sure that you come up when people search for your name. And so it's an interesting way to go about it, but I guess it has to be done, right? You have to make sure that people can see you when they're searching for you.
Yep. And if you think about it, some people say, well, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, well, think about it. Everybody else that's advertising to be on your page, and when you're advertising to be on their page, you're doing it because it works. So if someone's putting their books on your product page, or if they're using brand sponsor brand ads or search result ads, and they're appearing above you in the search results, they're doing it because it works. So kind of, I refer to it as pay to play. Amazon is basically pay to play now. You have to pay to advertise your own name so that people will find you when they search for you.
Yes, things have changed quite a bit. Yeah. So.
Hey, Mel, I want to ask you, are you all in with KU, or are you, are some of your books wide? I can't remember.
I did a wide experiment for about a year and a half. At one point, I had about 40 of my books wide. And I was actually making as much money wide with those books as they were making in KU. So I was able to offset the cost of, I was able to make the same income. The downside was that I was spending more money to advertise because I had to advertise for all these different stores. It was. I found that my ads were better if I could target by store more. And like for example, when I wanted to advertise for Kobo, I made ads specifically for Canada for people who read on Kobo. By doing that, like I had at any given time in the top 10 books on Kobo Canada, there was like 2 or 3 of my books that were in there. But the thing that caused me problems personally is all of my books are in one universe. My readers kind of got that because I've been really well branding my universe. Everybody kind of knows, like, okay, this is the Aeon 14 universe, and but when KU readers looked and saw that a lot of my books weren't in KU, they just didn't pick any of them up. I don't think it's a problem that people would have normally when they write entirely separate series. But when you write in one massive universe, it's either all in KU or it's not. Because what I ended up seeing was that the books were still in KU, their KU reads were going down.
Right.
That was what me to put everything back.
And then with your massive universe, do you have people writing in that universe with you? You do, don't you?
I've got 9 different co-authors.
Yeah. You want to talk about that? I'd love to hear about it.
Sure. Well, one of the things I think is really important for authors to understand, I guess there's 2 things. Co-authoring a book with someone else does not make that book come out faster. In my experience, it probably makes the book take longer to write.
Yeah.
The other thing is that your readers will buy if there's 2 author names on a book, it's less likely that people will buy it. And that's something that's been proven time and time again. Even the trad pub industry, for what they do is they make, if there's 2 authors working on a book, they create a pen name and they just use a single pen name for the book. Because readers just don't know, they're not sure what they're going to get if there's 2 names on the book. So it's not going to sell more books and it's not going to come out faster. People have to understand that going right into it. And of course, there's exceptions to every rule, but don't expect it to do the things that are against the norm. The reason why I use co-authors is because I'm trying to create this massive universe that's telling this effectively kind of like a single story in many respects. It's ultimately going to be over about 400 books. And I understood that I couldn't, it would be one note if I wrote the whole thing solo. Like I wouldn't be able to create a diverse enough universe and diverse enough characters if I did it all by myself. So I brought in other authors for that. And I also kind of brought in other authors with the hopes that eventually they could write more books almost solo. And I have actually gotten to that point. Like some of my co-authors I work with now have written like 10 books with me. And with those authors at this point now, I really just need to peruse the book quickly. It used to be that I had to rewrite half the book. But now I can, now at this point, 10 books in, they actually do start to become accelerators. But it's not the sort of thing someone should expect to happen right away.
Right. That's so interesting.
That is really interesting. So my question on that is, when you started writing the first books, did you have this grand vision? Did you want all of your books to be in the same universe, or did it grow kind of organically?
Back when I first started writing, I had no idea that it was possible to write as many books as I do now. Like I thought that wow, an author who really writes a lot of books could maybe write like 30 books in their lifetime.
Right. Yeah.
Belief. People do, and that's fine. But for me, I realized I could and wanted to write a lot more than that. So my vision was sort of like, yeah, they can like write like a 20 to 30 book universe. It'll be really cool, and that'll be exciting. So I did initially plan on writing this massive universe, and on top of that, I actually did 2 years of research before I started writing, where I built rules for the universe and really established my setting really well. So I understood how the whole thing was put together. So my vision of what amazing and grand was, though, changed quite a bit. Like I said, because it went from like maybe 20 or 30 books to thinking about 300 to maybe 500 books even that I want to write.
That's just incredible.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, really and truly. I just can't get over it. That is just amazing. So tell us, what is the best thing you've done to set yourself up for success, do you think?
The single best thing, I think it really has to be a solid understanding of advertising.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess actually that's not really true now that I think about it, because if my books were garbage, I could advertise them all I want. I would have no read through.
Right.
So I suppose really at the root of it all, the best thing I ever did for myself was reading a lot of books in the genre I write in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think because that's what I credit my ability to tell a good story to all of that content I consumed.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, because if you read in the genre you're writing in and you love that, it's almost like you can't help but pick up the things that will help your books be successful. Some people, I think, are like you, and they can just read the books and then they've kind of got it and they can go with it. And other people, I think, they read them, but it helps them to take a course or to read a writing book because it helps them to maybe see the structure better.
Yeah,
but I think that's a great way to learn your genre and learn what people want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and my statement where I think I've never taken courses or anything like that is not to say that courses are bad or that other people shouldn't take them.
Right.
I recognized a long time ago the way that I learn is by doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't learn nearly as well by taking a course. So for me, it's much better use of my time to just start doing something. But that's not true for everybody.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, we just interviewed Wendy Bella, and she said she writes romance, and she said the same thing, that if she tries to take a course or a book, it's not helpful to her. And so I think we all have to figure out how we work best, and then just do that and just be happy with that. It takes a while to come to that knowledge, I guess, of ourselves.
Yep. It does.
So this has been very helpful, and you've shared a lot of great information, and we appreciate it. So can you tell people where they can find out more about you?
Certainly. If folks are interested in reading science fiction books that tell a massive story that follows 4 women across thousands of years, then you can go to aeon14.com. That's AEON 14, the number 14.com. And you can grab the great first book to start with. Is called Outsystem. There's actually a button on the main page that says Start Here. And you can click that. It takes you to a good place to start. And if you want to learn more about the nonfiction that my wife Jill and I write about how to market and how to launch books and whatnot, you can go to thewritingwives.com. So it's the words thewritingwives.com. And we have our books up there, and we also sometimes do webinars too, where we do trainings on certain things like Facebook advertising and whatnot.
Right.
That's
Sounds
fantastic.
great.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a blast. Thanks for having me.
Sure. All right. We'll see everybody later.
Thanks for listening to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. We hope this episode inspired you, empowered you, and made you laugh a little bit too. If you loved it, tell your friends about it. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a review. We look forward to being with you again next week.